and hand over to Rachel.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Amy, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. It's fantastic, as always, to see some familiar names. And we're really delighted today to be, well, and actually slightly scared, of course, reputation of Casvo, slightly scared but thoroughly delighted to welcome Warrant Officer John, or Jake Alpert, with us today. And I'm particularly delighted because we have been quite featuring the twin-winged master race, haven't we, in terms of pilots and stuff over the last few weeks. So it's nice to start to be able to level it up because Jake's background is his RAF regiment. So Jake, I wonder, could I just first ask you, because there's quite a diversity of backgrounds of the people that are on the call today. Can you just kind of explain to us what the role of CASWO, Chief of the Air Staff's Warrant Officer, what that involves?
Of course, can, yeah, and thank you for inviting me to this morning's session. You know, going out to the Royal Air Force Association, and with that, I just want to thank you before we start, is that the great work you've done for the RAF family. It's been really important due to the strain and stress of the epidemic across the UK and globally as well at the same time. And throughout that, really, our service personnel wouldn't perform if it wasn't for their family and partners. And so I really sort of treasure that for what you've done over the past couple of months. So I'd like to thank you. And then just moving on is obviously Amy and Rachel. Thanks for, you know, sort of setting this sort of digital access Zoom session with the audience today. It's outstanding. So, and it gives me a great opportunity to speak about the Air Force and a little bit about me as well. So my role within the Royal Air Force is that basically I'm the Chief of the Air Staff's Warrant Officer. So I'm the Senior Warrant Officer enlisted of the service. And really what I do is that I will travel around the Air Force and report back to the senior leadership team of the service and tell them what it's like to live on the front line, or what it means to a family who lives in married quarters or single living accommodation, all different sort of threads which really challenge our people on a daily basis, whether it's mental health, health and well-being, just the service lifestyle, all them different sort of domains of life in the Royal Air Force. But from my perspective as well, it is a privilege. It doesn't come easy to get to this position. It's taken me 30 years to become Chief of the Air Staff's Warrant Officer, and also to serve the Chief of the Air Staff, because, you know, he's got some great ideas for the service and sort of safeguarding the reputation of the Royal Air Force. But most of all is what we, you know, is projecting air and space power for the nation, which is really important. And to look after the sovereignty of the United Kingdom, which is our sort of deliver on operations, which is our first sort of defence task line, which we do on a daily basis.
So you mentioned that obviously you've worked very hard over the last 30 years to get to the position you're in now. Was joining the Air Force something that you always wanted to do?
Not necessarily. I mean, you know, from when I joined the Air Force in 1988, you never even picture really being a warrant officer or even being a corporal. I think you just want to get through basic training and survive that moment of that transfer from being a civilian to being in it, you know, to being in the Air Force. So for me, I didn't really think about that. But I think, you know, from my perspective, is that defence anyway and the Royal Air Force gives you opportunities, but nothing, you know, success doesn't come for free. So I think throughout my journey of being in the service, that I've had some great opportunities, even from going on operations. You know, I've done 13 operational tours, which I've spent over, you know, 2 years in Afghanistan in particular. And then I had the opportunity to serve with the Royal Navy and work with the Royal Marines for 3 years on an exchange. I worked with the British Army 1 RTR at RAF Honington. So I've done many different diverse sort of roles within the service. And in particular, you know, I've some really enjoyable moments. And it's not just that, is that what I do feel for what the Royal Air Force has given me is that it's given me a stable lifestyle, and, you know, and it's given me an offer really, which is good, you know, in the modern day. And so I can look after my family. So I feel by being the Chief of the Air Staff's Warrant Officer that, you know, the Air Force doesn't owe me anything. I owe the Air Force everything. So that's my sort of my method of thought, I think, as a sort of sit in this seat and wear the badge of office of Chief of the Air Staff's Warrant Officer.
And what motivated you then, Jake, to join when you were, how old were you when you joined?
18.
So at age
So
18, what motivated you
yes.
to think, right, Air Force is for me?
Well, I think for me is that I come from a service background. My father was in the Royal Navy, and he was a submariner for 22 years. So
Mm.
he's quite hardcore, I'll be honest. So, you know, I had that sort of military background of a family. My grandfather served in the artillery in the army. So it was quite regimental at home. And I think that I think he brought me up on the sort of view, or his view of me joining the services. But what I would say is that when I chose to join the Royal Air Force, is that he didn't speak to me for about 8 months, I think, after I sort of walked in the Avco and I signed up for the service. But he got over it. And I think I did a bit of a regain when I served with the Royal Marines and went to sea on HMS Ocean for a few months. And he started probably, you know, he came accustomed to it over that stage. But I can't really fault my upbringing. You know, my father did some, he's passed away now, but he was a great sort of figurehead for me. And he gave me all the tools to be successful in the service. And, you know, if he was around and he could see me being, you know, the senior warrant officer of the Royal Air Force, I'm sure he'd be very proud. And if he's
I'm sure
looking
he would.
down, then yeah,
I'm
no,
sure he
thank you.
would. And
Yeah.
why did you make that, despite what you probably knew it might annoy your father? Why did you make the choice Air Force rather than Navy or Army as your grandfather?
I think with it, I think I think you're quite young and naive when you're 18 years of age, and you look at the three services and you look at the offer, and I think it's about the opportunity. And when I looked at the Royal Air Force, in particular the RAF Regiment, you know, which is sort of the infantry for the Air Force, protecting air assets and operating a complex air environment, is that for me, that was the answer, was the Air Force, because of all the opportunities which was there at the time. But when I joined the Air Force, like a lot of people, you know, of my age who have served, you know, beyond 30 years, when I joined the service, there was over 90,000 people in the Royal Air Force. You know, as I speak today, you know, we're just probably about 31,750. So times have changed, you know, as technology has grown and capability, and we operate in a different space now when we look at space and cyber and information. You know, things have totally changed from a multi-domain perspective as we get challenged and we go globally as we go forward. But for me, you know, I think the offer was there and it was just a great opportunity at the time.
And would you, because I think there'll be some people on the call who perhaps aren't quite so familiar with what the RAF Regiment as a whole does. Can you kind of explain the role, you talked about the infantry, can you explain the role of the RAF Regiment within the Air Force?
Yeah. For me, I think the role of the RAF Regiment is slightly changing as well to our current sort of operational environment and what it looks like in the future from a force protection perspective. But I'd say throughout my trade and what I've experienced, you know, operating in Afghanistan, is that the RAF Regiment's been quite successful over the years with regards to delivering force protection, in particular Afghanistan, places like Camp Bastion, Kandahar, and things like that. But we're quite diverse at the same time. We do a lot of tactical air controlling, which is sort of air and land integration. We do a lot of that. I think we're starting to get in a different sort of RPAS network, which is using UAVs and things. So we're really drifting into a different space of what the RAF Regiment looks like over the next 10 to 15 years, which is quite interesting. But I'd say from my perspective, it's given me a lot of opportunities. You know, I've operated in Africa, Kuwait, I've operated in Northern Ireland on a number of occasions. And for me, is really to wrap our protection around air assets, because, you know, air assets are very vulnerable when they're static on the ground, and also the people to sort of generate and operate them capabilities. So we need to make sure that we've got some special layered defence after our assets.
And would you say it's the air controlling, it's the protection of air assets, and now it's the, you know, working with remotely piloted air systems that that differentiates the RAF Regiment from the Army?
Without a doubt, because it's having that, it's being air aware, it's understanding air and space power and how that operates. So for me, when you look at air and land integration, I think that the RAF Regiment is key for defence. And when you look at the threats to air bases as we move forward in the future, that it's key that we've got them air aware RAF regiment on the ground, operating at range and at speed and rapid reaction at the same time, because when we look at modern day warfare, it looks slightly different over the next 10 to 15 years.
So then take us right back down to 1988, 18-year-old Jake. What did your, how did your, you know, what was, you went into the Air Force and obviously started your basic training. Can you just talk us through kind of what that involved? Because that's slightly different, isn't it, to what perhaps other people in the Air Force do?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I found, I think when I went through phase 1 training back in the day, it was something like 6 weeks, and to do phase 2 training, you know, we're in the Cold War era. So the centre of gravity for defence was probably in Germany at that time, fighting the Cold War, and I used to spend a lot of my time overseas. And we had different sort of types of equipment. I used to be actually used to be a Spartan tank CVRT light armoured commander at the time. But
wow.
I think with it, I always had a desire to be, to be a military parachutist. So I did something called a pre-parachute selection course, which is which is quite arduous. And I did that at a young age, and really it propelled my career to operate in a different way as I started to move forward. So I did a long period of time on a squadron called 2 Squadron RAF Regiment, which has a para capability, and it's also a feeder unit for Special Forces at the same time, for Special Forces Support Group at St Athens. So that really, really propelled me, and I did a lot of time on that squadron.
What really appealed to you, Jake, about parachuting then? What was it that you thought, oh wow, that's for me?
I don't know really. I think it was all about something to sort of aspire to, and something I always looked up to. You know, was to be sort of the sort of elitism of the RAF regiment, of being on 2 Squadron, and it always had that aura about it, I think, and that attraction at the time. So I think when I used to look at 2 Squadron, I used to think, right, that's going to be at me at some stage. And when you're quite young enough to do an arduous course at the ages of 18 and 19, then, you know, the question's why not? You know, because they did some great things, and plenty of parachuting at the time. And I was based at a station called RAF Hull Abington, when we used to jump out of the balloon. So that was quite interesting. And when I used to do it with equipment at night, it was a little bit of a different story then. I used to be a little bit nervous, but I'm over that now. I was
going to ask, were there any moments where you thought, oh?
Yeah, I mean, I've done quite a lot of parachuting. So I jumped into Sierra Leone back in the day on Op Siltman. That was quite interesting as an operational jump. I've jumped into the jungles of Belize. I've jumped in the desert in Kuwait. So I've had loads of opportunities, and then I did one of the biggest parachute descents in Zarnan on exercise Purple Star in 1995, I think, which was really, really interesting, working with the 16th Air Assault Brigade out in America for about 6 weeks. And that was a great opportunity for me.
So huge numbers of people jumping at the same time?
Exactly, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's been pretty exciting.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
So that was your kind of, that seems to me like that was perhaps your first goal once you joined the Air Force, was parachuting, you know, going to 2 Squadron. Is it 2 Squadron, did you say? Yeah.
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
And then at what point then did you think, right, my next goal is this?
Yeah, I didn't really look at goals. I looked at opportunities, what the Air Force has given me. So I thought I'd go into a training post. I worked at the Force Protection Centre at RAF Honington, and that was to train people to go on operations for a long period of time. That worked really well.
What kind of stuff would you train them then in, James?
Yeah, well, I trained them ready to do to go out of area. So at the time, Bosnia was enduring and stuff like that. So it was ready to get people prepared to go to a theatre entry standard into the Balkans, for example. Okay. I did that, and people going out to the Middle East, depending what the threat areas were, we train them up to a certain standard. That was quite interesting, and I immersed myself in chemical warfare MBC at the time as well, because that was one of the themes of the Force Protection Centre, and the way it supported the Royal Air Force and prepared and trained its people for operations. So that was a great time for me, because it gave me different tools as well of being an instructor.
So what other, you talked about chemical warfare. What other aspects of, you know, preparation did you have to, you know, train them in?
Well, it was different. I mean, when we went through Gulf War I and things like that, obviously there was a chemical threat from Saddam Hussein and things like that. So because of that, then we had to train a lot of people from the Royal Air Force up to a certain standard, you know, to be prepared to go out into theatre. So there was a few different sort of systems we had to adhere to at the time, and training process and training objectives we needed to achieve, so to make sure that people were ready to go on operations.
Did you enjoy that training aspect? Because obviously that's quite different, I assume, from what you've done previously.
I always found it hard in my career is that, you know, when there's a campaign on, or there's a conflict somewhere and you're training people to go away, that really you want to be going away. You want to be the individual who's going on operations with everybody else. So there's been occasions when I've had to watch it, you know, campaigns happen on TV and not been where I haven't participated in that operation in particular, but there's a means to an end. I can't do everything at the time as a young corporal, so everybody else needs the opportunity. And when you look at, you know, generating a force, is a time that you just got to prepare people to go on operations, and that was one of them. Whilst I was you know, working, and I was assigned to the FP Centre at Honington.
And how long were you at Honington then, doing that role?
I've done a few stints at Honington throughout my career at different ranks, but I would say overall about 10 to 11 years on and off.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was.
And then at some point, your thoughts turned to working with the Navy and the Marines.
Yeah, I don't know. I had probably a moment of madness when I put the application in for it. But for me, that's another highlight of my career, because I had to do my All Arms Commando course, and I was a senior Brecon with the British Army. That was quite arduous as well. So I went down.
And what did that involve, Jake? You said it was arduous. I think that's probably an understatement.
Yeah. Well, I'm not really used to climbing ropes at 30 feet with equipment and things like that. But for me, it was really an education about the Royal Navy, and I still benefit from that this day to understand how the Navy operates. So it's been really, really, really good for me throughout my career. But I think with it, when I joined the Royal Marines, it was a different environment, and they are very unique in defence of what they deliver, whether it's amphibious and Arctic warfare. And I was very honoured to sort of experience that. And also I did a tour in Afghanistan with the Royal Marines to take over 16 Brigade in 2005, which I did that 2006. And that was some great times, you know, and it was hard at the same time. We did lose some people, like you do on operations on occasion. That did happen throughout the tour, but I think with it, throughout the tour with them, I do treasure their moments, and I have made some friends for life. I'd still say that. And a current one, who's he's the Regimental Sergeant Major of Commando Training Centre, Ross Wilson, down in Exmouth, and he's a great guy, and we still keep in contact now. So it's familiar faces, because we've all sort of experienced their moments on operations, and you know, treasured their moments as well on reflection. So it was really, really, really good. And throughout that, you know, I did really well. I got awarded the Commandant's, you know, certificate from the Royal Marines. So I sort of treasured it. Yeah, definitely. It was a great time up in Scotland at Arbroath.
And when you went into working with the Marines, because obviously the RF regiment is very elite, did you find a similar ethos? Was it a massive culture shock? Become the regiment, do you think it was an easier step across?
Not necessarily. I think as long as I was physically prepared to go there and be successful on my commando course, that the transition, I didn't find it that hard really. The best thing I found out about the Marines was most of all was the camaraderie, that everybody's been a commando first, no matter what branch and trade they were. So it really worked out pretty well, and the rapport I got throughout there, it's all about respect, and you've got to earn it. You know, I was a troop sergeant on a close combat company, so I think it's because everybody's looking at me. Sometimes you're the person from the Royal Air Force Regiment, and it did feel like a little bit like a goldfish bowl in the beginning. But I think after that, I got over it, and because I performed, and you know, it's evidence-based leadership, it was quite transformational. Then I feel that's which sort of led me to success throughout my tour at 4-5 Commando.
And would you say that's one of the tips you'd give people about how to be successful? It's about earning respect.
I think it plays into it when you hold different ranks through the Air Force. But for me, I think the Royal Air Force has changed. I think we need to, our culture needs to change slightly as we start to move forward in the future, because the face of the way we operate in the future is very, very different, whether it's at home or overseas. So I think we're starting to change and make some, some positive changes across the service when we look at rank, is to flatline it in certain ways when we talk about creative thinking, innovation, and the way that gets communicated up the chain of command, and to break down them sort of barriers. So for me, I think there's a time and place for everything. If you're in a war fighting organisation and you're on the front line, then that takes a different type of leadership. I think when you're at home and you may be office bound, then you use it different. So I think it all comes down to emotional intelligence and the way you operate based on your experience of holding different ranks throughout your service career.
And that ability to be flexible depending on the situation, because you still need it in you. If a war was to break out, you still need to be able to go out and perform, don't you, even if you're different in your office environment.
No, I do believe that. And, as we speak, that, when we've supported the government over the past 2 months with the MACA requests, which is really, really, I've been really, really taken away from the performance of the Royal Air Force throughout the epidemic of COVID-19, and for what we've asked our people to do, because the Royal Air Force hasn't stopped, business as usual every day, delivering what we need to deliver and the way we support the government and the nation. We've continued to do that, to deliver on operations. So for me, when we look at our future operating space, we've probably been in it for the past 2.5 months as well, both at home and overseas, because we've still got commitments in the Middle East and globally at the same time. So I think it's about the service, of how agile the service actually is, and that's been tested over the past 10 weeks.
So you obviously have a huge amount of operational experience, and you mentioned in I can't remember how many different conflicts or countries you talked about.
Tons.
Tons,
Tons. There we go.
We've talked about your experience when you were attached to the Marines, with the Marines. What other kind of experiences really stand out, either in a good way or a bad way, in terms of the ops that you've been involved with?
If I'd be quite open, there was a time when I was, I've been a garrison sergeant major both at Bastion and Kandahar, and I think within that time, the UK was taking high losses as well on a weekly basis, and we used to have to, do certain ceremonies and repats and things like that, and that did take effect on, service personnel who were, serving on operations. But throughout that, I think it all comes down to key leadership at the same time. So I think it's taken the rough with the smooth. But from a personal experience, it has been challenging, because when you're in a position of leadership, is that on occasion, just to make sure that everybody else has got the confidence in you, that you can't really show any emotion. And leadership on occasion, especially if you're something like a garrison sergeant major, is that you've just got to be there as that figurehead to give everybody confidence that, we've still got a mission critical output to continue. And then we've got to continue with normal business apart from what's actually happened to get people through it. But I think for what Defence has done over the past 10 to 15 years, especially of the way we've theoried and we've operated in an asymmetric environment, as in Afghanistan and Iraq.
Jake, explain what that means, asymmetric environment.
Asymmetric environment is like a terrorist sort of Al-Qaeda sort of environment. So for me, we've really, really been successful there, because we've had a lot of takeaways, and the lessons we identified whilst we're in that campaign, we've taken that, and I'd say that that's really stuck in Defence from all the interventions we've got to look after the welfare of our people, and we continue to do that on a daily basis, and it even comes down to operating, across Defence with the epidemic under COVID-19, that we've got them welfare systems in place to make sure that the health and well-being of our service personnel is at the front of the business.
But you, as a leader in those really difficult times on ops, we've talked a bit earlier about physical fitness and the importance of physical fitness for a lot of the roles that you've done. But when you had to, as you said, perhaps control your emotions so that you were still that strong leader, how did? Because clearly inside, I'm sure that you're feeling potentially quite differently. How did you cope with that?
With it, I suppose, you know, the more experience you get in situations you've got to adapt and overcome, is that you seem to build sort of a systematic control system within yourself. And physical fitness, really, for me, you know, I used to run in Afghanistan if I could, depending on the threat and the risk, is that even if it was a combat outpost in the middle of the Sangin Valley, I used to be at combat outpost Robinson, and it was a kilometre in this Hesco wall. And every other day, I used to do 10 laps, and it was a kilometre, so it was 10k, 6 miles. And I used to just find that, you know, if I did some physical fitness, that it really assists me on what I was doing, and sort of manage myself in the appropriate way when it comes to sort of that mental health. It gave me time to think. And the other thing is that, you know, I think my family have been such a great support throughout, you know, my service career. And my wife is very understanding, and she's very patient, even for letting me, you know, to be this pioneer within the Air Force and take up this office as the Chief of the Air Staff's Warrant Officer. I think there's all them different systems you've got, which is behind you, within you, really, to be able to manage yourself in the appropriate way.
So intermingled with some of those later stints in Afghanistan, I think you then did 2 tours as a SWO on 2 different stations. Is that
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
And where was that then?
So the first sort of station warrant officer duty or assignment I completed was with AVM James. He's AOC 22 group at Shawbury.
He's on tomorrow, in fact.
Oh, is he? Well,
having a chat with us tomorrow, yeah.
Yeah, no, and he was a great station commander, and you know, I sort of took up the Shawbury post on promotion, and for me that was you know, it was automatically going from flight sergeant, you know, to a state. So it was a big ask because I had some senior warrant officers on that station. But I think that was I think that was the sort of foundations of me being a warrant officer in the Royal Air Force, which gave me them different levers and that emotional intelligence, how to treat people and release the full potential out of the station. And also my commitment to the station commander, you know, to be on his shoulder and to speak the truth as well on occasion, to make sure that there was no decisions made without any considerations of our sort of boys and girls on the unit.
And was that your primary role then as station warrant officer?
I think so.
The interests of the,
it is, but the other thing is it's all about maintaining standards of the service as well.
Yeah, I think everyone thinks of a SWO as a scary man or woman wandering around.
Yeah. So it's all about, you know, stands and ethos of the Royal Air Force at the same time. And, you know, I think any warrant officer in the Royal Air Force carries that. That's our responsibility, is to maintain standards, but also be very flexible. Because, you know, if we look at the whole force of the Royal Air Force with civil servants, contractors and things like that, and industry, we really need to be flexible in the 21st century of the way we manage people. And so from that, there's a lot of takeaways for me of that sort of initial part of being a warrant officer in the service, being the station warrant officer at Shawbury. But it was quite an enjoyable time for me. And
then you became the station warrant officer at Halton as well, is that right?
That's correct, and that was a bit of that was a big ask, because that's the Phase 1 training unit.
Absolutely.
Air Force up at the top recruit training squadron. But for me, no, that was it was an honour to get that position, and you know, that executive employment to be a station warrant officer. And not just that, is that, you know, throughout the post, you know, I got the opportunity to go to staff college and to sort of sit shoulder to shoulder with squadron leaders on IOF 4 and 5. Or ICSCR in old money, it's just the basic staff course, and do things like that. And then I got the opportunity to do something called the Keystone Staff Course in the United States with the top level enlisted E9s from across the Department of Defense for 2 weeks. So that was another opportunity I got to sort of really sort of push myself forward, you know, especially in competition of this position. And it really opened my eyes to the Department of Defense in the United States. I had the opportunity to go to Guantanamo Bay. You know, I went to El Paso and everything, and it was really interesting to see how the US Air Force operates, the US Army, Marine Corps, and Navy, and Coast Guard at the same time. So that was really great. But most of all, I think it's about being that senior warrant officer on a station, and just making sure and safeguarding the reputation of the Royal Air Force at the same time, even though it was a phase one sort of training unit. And just to sort of talk about Halton itself, and I experienced when I went back there a few weeks ago, is that when I was having a bit of a down day, to be honest, or one of those days, I used to walk myself up to the recruit training squadron, and I used to just pull a few recruits to the side, and I used to say, so what trade are you going to be? Want to probably say a PTI or an MT driver, or even trade group one, an engineer. And they'd say, from the age of 14, all I've wanted to do is join the Royal Air Force. I'm going to be an MT driver. I just want to drive vehicles. And if you want to talk about reverse empowerment, then that used to lift me 10 feet in the air. And then it used to lift my day at the end. Do you know what? I think this is why I get out of bed on a daily basis, is for you, is then the future leaders of the Royal Air Force, the next generation, etc. So for me, that was the great thing about serving at RAF Halton.
And I think we've got some on the call at the moment, and we'll undoubtedly have people who will be watching this video back later who are thinking of joining the Air Force and perhaps thinking of going in, and hoping to get to Halton. What advice would you give them about how to be successful in that? Well, how to be successful in getting in, and how to make it through phase one training?
For me, I think, be honest. I think integrity is a big thing whilst going through training. But for me, is don't wait around. Don't say, oh, I'll put the application in tomorrow or the day after. Just do it. I mean, I did that for a few months before I joined the service. So just get the application. And I think the offer and the opportunities the Royal Air Force gives everybody is outstanding. Even when we look around us, even in comparison to the two service. And I think, like I started when we had the sort of interview, is that, the Royal Air Force has given me so much that for me, it's just, my mother calls me the fairy tale. And my advice to everybody is that, just work on your weaknesses. And I think once you work on your weaknesses, I think you'll be successful, and then you'll be ready to walk through the gates at RAF Halton. And then stick by the rules. We do things for a reason. We do, and it's that transfer from a civilian to a service person at the same time. And we do that for a reason. But after that, then I'd say it's an adventure at the same time. Even though we need people to go on operations, we need people to support defence output on a daily basis. But if you look at the opportunities within the Air Force, we're going from 68 sort of branch and trades, and we're narrowing it down to 10. There's so much people can do. And it's not just about what they do on a daily basis. It's about sports, it's about physical fitness, it's about education. It's the whole package that we offer, to the sort of civilian sector now is absolutely outstanding. So I can't fault it whatsoever. Yeah, definitely.
So you clearly understand to be incredibly passionate about the Air Force. And you sound to me quite excited about what the future of the Air Force might hold. How do you think it's going to evolve in kind of coming years?
Yeah, I think for me, if we look at the RF strategy at the minute, and we're looking at building the next generation Air Force, and we're talking about Astra. We're trying to look forward 10 to 15 years to what the Royal Air Force is going to look like. And within that journey is that there's so much digital access. There's so much digitalisation across the UK that we're really, really going to be immersed in that. But I feel that really, if we really don't get after this as an organisation, when we talk about cyber, we talk about space, we talk about information, and we talk about all these different networks, that we'll still be a great Air Force, but we won't be a relevant Air Force. And that's why we're doing what we're doing. So we're investing in the right areas, and we've got some great platforms coming online. We've got P8 coming out of Lossy lately, the Lightning Force in support of Carrier Strike 21 for the for the aircraft carrier at the minute, for the QE. That's at sea, and we're doing testing on that. And then techs coming into Warrington. And the way we train and we operate is going to be totally different over the next 5 to 10 years. So what I'd say from the Chief of the Air Staff at the minute is that we are really, really working hard to lay the foundations of the future of the Royal Air Force.
And so clearly there's some really exciting developments in how the role of the Air Force is going to change. Do you think that the way that the employment for people within the Air Force, that's obviously evolving as well? What kind of changes do you think that we'll see in the near future, kind of domestically, I suppose? And I suppose I ask that in light of both the fact that COVID-19 has had an impact on the Air Force in terms of home working, just in the same way it has for some people who are able to, in the same way that it has on the rest of our population. But also yesterday there were a number of announcements around wittering and the future accommodation model. I just wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think when we look at our focus on people, the part of the strategy, enhanced career management and things, and then we've got FAM, we've got flexible service, we've got all these new initiatives and pilots which are coming through the service at the minute. But what it is just forced modernisation for me. Just modernising the offer to Generation X at the same time. And if we don't do that, then we won't capture everybody we want to in the future. And that means that, we are performing the Stonewall, and we've got many accolades for the way the Air Force has performed as an employer over the past 24 months, and we'll continue to do that. And I think on an annual basis that we're revising the offer. If we look at the Forces Help to Buy scheme in particular, that's been so successful for Defence and the Royal Air Force that people can make the foundations of their future, and find somewhere to live, surrounded by a station. That I think it's second to none, where we can get somebody who's done, little service and get a tax-free loan, so they can go and do that. And we're revising that in a minute to do a top-up loan if it gets through Chief Defence people, so we can continue to do that. And I think with it, when we look at the offer like that, that it will continue to evolve. And I think that people have got a lot more choice as well, and they've got a say in what their future employment looks like. And I think when we look at it, we are looking at below the zone promotions. So we've got somebody who can be an SAC to corporal within 1 year, depending on what their reporting structure's like. So from there, there's great opportunities, definitely. And I think we'll continue to sort of review that as we move over the next 10 to 15 years.
You haven't sent in a question or message a question, do feel free to do that, and we'll try and get as many of them to Jake as we can. We've got one from Drew, and that's it. I'm just going to read it out to you. So it says, "Thanks, Mr. Alpert. It's clear you know how lucky you are, but thanks for sharing your terrific story. I too have had the dubious pleasure of being the only crab amongst a bunch of bootlegs and matelates, the single most banter-intensive period of my life. However, my question, having first-hand knowledge of how different the service is today at every level from when we were youngsters, do you feel that the band of brothers and sisters bond between us is still as strong as it was?" Good question.
I'd say for me, from an RAF perspective, or from a single service perspective, that I do sit on the board of and represent the Royal Air Force amongst the other single service warrant officers in support of SEAC, who supports CDS. So it's never been stronger, that bond between us. I think when we've looked at COVID-19 in particular, I work my opposite of the Royal Marines, the Corps RSM, or the Warrant Officer of the Naval Services, Sergeant Major of the British Army. So with then, I think we've actually converged so tightly together to make sure that the welfare and our people are supported in an appropriate way. And really, really, the way we communicate that through Chief Defence people, through the Chief of the Air Staff, or CGS, Chief of the General Staff, that we've continued to do that. So the bond has never been stronger, I feel. I think because of COVID-19, the new ways of working, especially from a Royal Air Force perspective, that my sort of camaraderie with my station warrant officers in particular has never been stronger. So I think from what we've been through over the last 10 weeks has really propelled the Royal Air Force forward by a light year to operate in a different way, which we're all benefiting from when you talk about working from home and flexible service and be able to do it at range. So that's been really successful.
So you think that through the Air Force, that whatever ranks, that the feeling of camaraderie and the feeling of dependence and trust and respect for colleagues working alongside you is just as strong as it was when you first joined?
Yeah, I think
despite changes in working practices.
Yeah, I think so. And it's that, and that really, really evolves when people go on operations as well, because people are forced to live and sleep and work together on a daily basis. And that strong bonds are pretty much there. I did do a Zoom session into Cyprus, and there was a few people from the AW online, and they were talking about obviously the strong bond we've got. And if we look at what the way we're delivering operations at the minute. You know, we've got people in Africa, we've got people globally, and I think it's friends for life as well when we sort of take that away. And even though people might be individual augmentees when they go out there, but they come out with a few more different friends. And as we speak at the minute, you know, we're supporting NATO at the minute up in Lithuania, enhanced air policing. We've got a squadron up there. And that squadron bond is very, very tight, because if it wasn't, then it wouldn't be as effective of what it is on a daily basis.
And we've had another question, which is, it's asking, so if you look back across your career, what would you say the high and the low points of your career have been?
That's
difficult question. We're getting some good questions today.
I've got loads of highs by serving in the Royal Air Force, you know, and I can't, you know, by becoming the Chief of the Air Staff's Warrant Officer is a high. You know, it's the highest position for a non-commissioned officer in the Air Force. So that I would say that's my number one. But other highs I've had, you know, I used to box for the Air Force, was the Lord Wakefield champion. I've had sporting events, I've experienced that. Passing my commando course was a high. Getting my green beret. There's loads of different features I've got and different sort of experience I've got in the service. I think my lows, to be honest, is that I think going on operations and losing friends. That's been my lowest point, I'd say, throughout my career. And well, anybody who passes away from the Royal Air Force or who's associated to the Royal Air Force is a low for me anyway. So that's my experience. But lows have been that, definitely, where I've really had to sort of step up to the mark and really drag people through their moments of loss. And I would say that's been the lowest points of experience while serving in the Air Force.
Yeah, understandably. So we have questions are zooming in here, literally. Okay, Drew says thank you. Thanks for the previous answer. Really good to hear such a positive answer. Sam is asking, what role do you see the RAF Regiment playing in the new space domain?
I think the RAF Regiment won't be just bespoke for the space domain. I think it's got. I think it'll be an actor in all different domains as it starts to operate as we go forward. And it's not. I don't think any particular role, if you talk about security and force protection, will just have one particular role. I think it will be multi-rolled as well. It'll be quite agile and flexible. When you talk about, you know, RPAS threats and stuff like that to airfields, it'll be in that game. Layered defence in sequence with enhanced with technology and security behind that. Using
Jake, just to explain for people who don't know what you mean, layered defence, etc.
Layered defence. So what I'd say by we do operate as a force protection in the FP sort of organisation is that, you know, we have got the RAF police, so we can go down to the traditional of having dog handlers. We can have different layers behind that, and if you look at the way the RAF Regiment operates, whether it's at range beyond an airfield or it comes slightly in. So there's different types of layered defence behind that. And by using technology as well and autonomy at the same time, artificial intelligence can be there, all right, for sort of tracking targets, facial recognition. There's loads of different systems which are coming into defence at the minute, which really the RAF Regiment will exploit as it starts to move forward and build itself for the future.
And actually, and now Adi and Tracy have asked a question that I'd like to know the answer to as well, because I don't know it, which is, why are the RAF Regiment called Rock Apes?
That's a good question. I think it goes back to something in Gibraltar in history, but I can't really answer it. Somebody's asked me that question before. I suppose if you ask an RAF Regiment gunner, everybody will come up with a different answer.
Yeah.
Something we've lived with since we sort of came into service. In the Second World War. So from my perspective, I haven't got a definitive answer for that. But rest assured, I don't walk like an ape, so I'm okay. Just it's just a name for.
Someone has been suggesting that it's race up the rock after the war, Barbary ape. There you go. As you say, everyone's got a theory.
I was close. Yeah, I was close.
Okay, so just moving a little bit away from work now, Steve is asking what, you know, and I guess we've all heard how committed, how passionate you are, how busy you are. What does your spare time look like?
Spare time, I'll be open and honest, is that I continue to do my physical fitness in the morning. So say, for example, I got up at 5:45 this morning. I did a 4-mile run to sort of set myself up and get myself ready for a day's work. But beyond that, I think in my spare time, because I'm away quite a lot, is best spent with my little boy called Jax. He's 3 years of age. So he keeps me going. My wife calls me Peter Pan. I don't know why, but anyway. So within that,
Useful good luck.
yeah, probably, yeah. So within that is that, I think it's time spent with my family is really, really important. But what I must say is that due to the lockdown, that
Yeah.
when the government came out with something called stay at home and bake, yeah, I have been baking over the past 10 weeks, I'll be honest. So I've made bread because it was empty at Tesco's in the first week or so.
Self-sufficient.
Yeah, I've made lemon cakes, I've made scones, I've made a full range of everything. I'm even thinking about buying a mixer. I don't know, I can with one. We'll wait and see if it's really taken on. But it has taken on because there's a number of warrant officers where we get on Twitter and then we'll do a Saturday bake and then we'll put our pictures on and stuff like that. So it's worked pretty well through digital means. So I'd say that, and I do enjoy watching a game of football as well. But obviously that's been off piste at the minute. So I think
it sounds like you're rather competitive on the baking front.
I am. Yes, I am quite competitive.
Maybe we should do a Rafa bake-off. Because I know you were going to do the London Marathon for us, weren't you? And obviously that.
Well, that's correct. Yeah. Well, I need to do the London Marathon for the weight I've put on through.
But, we could do a dual challenge: bake-off and London Marathon. You have to do both elements, maybe.
Carb heavy, yeah. So I think within that, going back to the London Marathon. Yeah, I mean, it got cancelled, the London Marathon, obviously, and I did train up to that. And I'll tell you all a bit of a secret is that the Sergeant Major of the British Army is running the London Marathon. And I was training to beat him because obviously he wouldn't sleep at night because he knows I've done it. So we used to message each other for what our Sunday run had looked like. So he was really unnerved that I was going to run it. But what I'm just going out to everybody is that, I was going to run the London Marathon for Rafa. And at the minute I have raised about £500 in my sort of just giving account, and I'll continue to do that if it comes off on October the 4th. But I'll still do it. I'll still aim to do it. And I have done a couple of half marathons for some of the RAF charities. I think it's important. It keeps me fit. And the thing is that I know the money I raise goes to a good cause at the same time and really looks after our service personnel, families and veterans. So it's really important that we keep that money coming through, and just to promote your charity in particular is really important to me, especially being in this role as well.
Well, thank you. I mean, for everyone, it's difficult times, and for us, the increase in demand for support is just gone through the roof, and it's fantastic that and there's lots of people on this call here who are all helping and contributing, whether it's volunteering their time or financially, and that's fantastic because it really is. There are so many people in really dire straits at the moment. So yeah, so I have fingers crossed that the postponement of the London Marathon comes off on October the 4th, and that you've worked off some of that cake in the meantime. But I do understand that you've been feeding the office. I feel a bit sad that I don't work down with you.
Just down the corridor, obviously, I've got the chief of the air staff, and he's out of office and stuff. So what I try and do is that I probably bake a cake, and I only have one or two slices, and then I take it to work, and then, well, it raises morale as well. So I'll call it a Caswell cake. So it's on a Monday, and it seems to work, and everybody gives me a smile, and then sort of grades me on my performance of baking. So I got a 9 the other day for I think it was ginger cake I bought on Mondays. 9, yeah. They'll never give me a 10 because that means I'll stop baking. So that's why
okay.
I get it. It's all the psychology behind baking, I think, when you offer it up anyway.
What's your next cake baking adventure? What have you got planned for them, or is it a secret?
I've got the director of legal services who works just to my right. So she's asked for a coffee and walnut cake. It's a bit old school, but it's not next gen. But from my perspective is that no, I'm going to make her a coffee and walnut cake. She's really good, and we get on really well. So I think it's the appropriate thing to do. And then I'll give the rest to the chiefs out of office. I'll do that. And
then force them all to go for a run with you so they don't get what's it called? The Corona Stone.
Corona Stone. Yeah, I know.
Well, Jake, thank you so much. It's been so fabulous that you've joined us today. So, it's been really interesting. Like I said at the beginning, I just think, for lots of us, people perhaps know more about the flying stuff, but not so much about force protection and what the regiment does, and obviously working with other services as well. So I just wonder whether you might just, I'm sorry if this is a bit of difficult question out of the blue, but what do you think, you know, you've talked about emotional intelligence and other bits and pieces, but looking across, you know, from your very exalted leadership role, what do you think makes a good leader, both in the military and, you know, in civilian world as well?
I remember reading a book by General Eisenhower and that, and throughout the book he mentions integrity about on 10 to 15 occasions in one chapter. And for me, I think it's being honest. I think it's about being authentic. And I think if you do that, you automatically get respect for me. So I think that when I walk across when I travel the service, that I'm just very honest. You know, I'm very honest when I support the Chief of the Air Staff, and I support, you know, my warrant officers and boys and girls across the service. And what I'd say from my perspective is the way I try and operate is that every email I get, whether it's a welfare issue and everything, I aim to answer it. It might not be in 24 hours, but I'll try and support our people as much as possible because I feel that's my role. And I think once that word gets around the sort of other ranks across the service, or even being an officer, if they need help, then I'll lean over backwards to help somebody. And I'll just tell you a quick story before we close, is that there was something went out on social media, and I can't name any names, and it was somebody in a little bit of distress from the Air Force. So somebody gave me this pointer, and I sort of looked them up. I managed to get the phone number, and I phoned them up, and this young other rank started crying on the phone because of the position they were in. Okay, and I managed to sort out the situation, what that young airman was in at the time, and I walked back into work on the Monday after sorting out the problem they've got to reach out to me, and there was a bottle of wine and a card and a letter on my desk. So if you want to talk about, you know, why do you do what you do on a daily basis for the Royal Air Force, I'd say that's probably one of the things why I do what I do for the Air Force on a daily basis. So for me, I think it's just trying to support each other, be honest, know yourself, know others is probably my advice for everybody. And I think if you're honest then and you're professional, then you'll succeed within the position you are. So that's the way I feel. I've been successful in the Royal Air Force throughout my 30 plus year career. Yeah.
Well, Jake, thank you so much. It's been a real privilege, a real honour to have you on today. And I can't thank you enough. You know, we're so proud of what you and the Air Force are doing, not just now, all of the time. And we're delighted, you know, to support you any way that we can as well. So thank you for joining us today. And I know, unfortunately, we can't see all the reactions from everyone else on the screen, but I'm sure that everyone else is doing as I'm doing. I'm raising my coffee cup to you and to the Air Force.
Yeah.
And thanks so much. And we look forward to your success in the London Marathon when it does take place, fingers crossed, in October. So
I'll be there. Yeah, definitely. Well, no, thanks for the team from RAFA as well for staging this. It's been on my it's been on my diary for a long time. The chief says, right, you need to get after RAFA, so I've been after it, and it's been a great experience because I am an RAF regiment gunner, but I'm a Royal Air Force Warrant Officer first, and I just do what I do on a daily basis because I'm in a great organisation. I've got some great leadership. So from that, a picture paints 1,000 words. And if there's anybody out there who wishes to join the Air Force, please do so because we're a great organisation and we're waiting for you. Yeah, definitely. So please, I look forward to, if anybody's interested, to see him at RAF Halton as we move forward in the future.
Thank you. And thanks so much, Jake. And we'll look forward to speaking to you soon. And thanks everyone else. Look forward to seeing you. And as I said, tomorrow, I think at 11 o'clock, we've got AOC 22 group, which is AVM Bunny James. So do feel free to join that tomorrow. And we look forward to seeing you. Thanks so much, everyone. And thank you, Jake. Bye.
Bye.